This is
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
Total Tony Browder for the totality of African American History Month. IKG-info, ASA Restoration Project.com. We're honored to have him here. Welcome back, brother. Hotep.
My pleasure. Hotep, brother.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we were talking in the last episode, we started talking a bit about Ma'at, but I want to go back for a minute. Last week, you also talked to us about the concept of God and the nature. I believe I'm saying that correctly.
Yes, absolutely.
Is Ma'at, this woman with wings, one of the nature?
Absolutely. She is. And again, nature means principle or aspect of divinity. Ma'at, on another level, also represents the universe and the ubiquitous forces that flow throughout the universe that impact everything. So it's critically important that a female symbolize the totality of existence. Another important female figure in this pantheon of Nile Valley Neteru is Newt. Newt represented the sky. And as we drill into her story, her narrative, she represented a specific portion of the sky, the Milky Way. And the Milky Way, to the ancients who lived in the Nile Valley, was a reflection of the Nile River in the sky. And we see depictions of Newt painted on the ceilings of tombs. For example, the ceiling of Ramesses the Fifth in the Valley of the Kings. So you see Newt, her hands are touching the earth, her body spans across the sky, and her feet are touching the earth. But her body is the heavens, her body is the Milky Way. So Newt swallows the sun when it sets in the west. And then you see this image of the red disk of the sun moving through the body of Newt through the nighttime sky during the underworld. And then she gives birth to the sun as a golden ball of light as it emerges from her womb in the east at dawn. So here we know, if we understand how to interpret, how to analyze this symbolism, here we know that the sun is one of the oldest symbols to represent God Almighty, the Creator, right? We go to church on Sunday, right? But here we see our ancestors in the Nile Valley show the primacy of an African woman by showing her giving birth to God. That's a powerful concept. And, before some people think that it's blasphemous, just understand, ask yourself the question, how can you have a God without having a goddess? And the beauty of the Neteru and Kemet is that every male Neter had his female counterpart. They got it right. They knew that this creative force was masculine and feminine, and that you need the two in balance in order to produce life. Life comes from the union of a man and a woman. So these concepts and ideas were ingrained in the history, the culture, the iconography of our ancient ancestors, but they have been misinterpreted by others and then fed to us to distort our perception of our ancestral legacy so that we would shy away from that and run towards information that would not give us the cultural or spiritual nourishment that we could really benefit from.
Did I just hear your Siri?
Well, actually, that was my iWatch.
Wait a minute.
Different time.
You talking about the power of women, and Siri, a woman's voice, wanted you to repeat it. Did you see that? Siri said, I didn't hear what you said. You need to say that again.
That's an amen, isn't it? Or a woman?
They didn't teach me this in this AI, this artificial intelligence. Time out. But no, that's imagine, sisters and brothers, where we would be as a people and as a society. And I'm not even talking about African people at this point. If people understood that the first civilization placed women on that plane.
Absolutely.
In a world today of sexism and subjugation, Yeah. I mean, we ought to, we really ought to think about that. And, you know, I have it, Tony and I just flowing, y'all. I have a direction I intend to go in, and Tony will say something to me and I'll go in another direction. But since you put that out there, women being equal. Well, first of all, let's do that. Do we know anything about how this civilization came to that understanding? Or was it just simply, like you said earlier, the concept of racism was not a popular human concept that had to be created? So I guess it was just natural, man, woman. I mean, I guess, was it just that people weren't tripping back then, or was there something else going on that established the feminine as sacred?
All right. So let's be clear that the word nature, which represents the unseen aspects of the creator, the word nature has come to us today in the word nature. So we talk about mother nature, but we don't talk about father nature, right? So these are ideas. If you look, and the whole essence of the concept of the neteru is plural, right? The whole concept of neteru is rooted in observation. These Africans saw the sun rise every morning in the east and set in the west. They saw animals respond to the presence of the sun. They saw animals go to sleep in the sun. They saw animals mating and producing other animals. They saw plants producing other plants. So they looked at their environment, and then they assigned to what they saw their understanding of what that meant in their lives. That's why many of the characters that you see in the hieroglyphic alphabet — hieroglyphic is a Greek word which means sacred carvings — the Africans in the Nile Valley refer to it as Medu Neter, the creator, the writing of the creator, the writings of the creator, right? So most of those glyphs are glyphs of animals or plants, birds, beetles. Khepre, the dung beetle, represented the sun rising in the east, having just been born from his mother Newt. So everything that they saw in the Nile Valley was tied to these forces that exist outside of the planet in the universe, which is Ma'at, right? Mother Nature gives us everything we need. What we have been dealing with, my brother, for the past 2,000 years is the erasure of the feminine spiritual principle from our consciousness. And we've been dealing with a male-dominated interpretation of creation that omits its female counterpart. And that's wrong. It's wrong, any way you look at it.
Yeah, it is wrong, and it shows. I mean, again, if our young people, especially our young women, were taught this, which is obviously, as you said, verboten to be taught, their self-perception would utterly change overnight if this was ingrained in a way that.
And young brothers wouldn't disrespect sisters, call them B's and H's. So this is something that we can take control over. This is something we can manage in our household. And again, to show you that our history is a current event, we're talking about things that were a part of our consciousness, that were stripped away from our consciousness, and we're struggling to restore our consciousness right now. One of the big news right now is Joe Rogan being snatched off of Spotify. NEI put together this clip of him using the N-word over and over and over and over and over again. Joe Rogan shouldn't be using the word. We shouldn't be using the word. We should not be using that word. And if we taught our children who they were, then they would speak like the sons and daughters of proud people. You know, and that's something that we have control over right now. And we need to exercise that control if we're going to save our race.
More MIP after this message. It's interesting, just since we're on this subject, my good friend, many of you follow Michael Harriot, which he posts a lot of viral threads on Twitter. He introduced me and others to a different perspective when it comes to the N-word. Apparently, the term NIGGE is a term he has begun to use. And in Ethiopian, I'm sorry, NEGUS, forgive me. Negus is a title that was given to an Ethiopian monarch.
Right.
So, some of us say to each other, "What's up, King? What's up, Queen?"
Mm-hmm.
So we just can't get that NG out of us. Maybe we ought to start calling each other Negus.
Mm-hmm.
Because
but look, now I've heard some misinformed young men use that same explanation to justify why they use the N-word, right? And they get it twisted because they don't really understand Amharic. They don't really understand the Ethiopian language in the context. So if we are going to use that word, we need to put it in correct historical context so that everyone understands why we're using that word. But we also need to be aware of the origins of the N-word and how that word was used by our enemy to destroy us mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And there is nothing endearing, there is nothing empowering about it's toxic. And you can't take a little bit of poison and think you're going to be all right.
More MIP after this message. So to put an even finer point on what we said last week, folks, those who are on social media saying that some people who talk about our ancient Kemetic history, our history and antiquity, are hoteps. And there are many who use that pejoratively. And there are even those who are referred to as hoteps that are keenly unaware of what Tony has explained to us today in terms of how women were treated and were imagined and realized, both imagined and realized, in antiquity. Mm-hmm. So, one, hotep should not be a pejorative, and definitely not more pejorative than the N-word. Mm-hmm. Can't use N-word as a term of endearment and then use a term called peace, which refers to our antiquity, as a negative word. Second of all, rather than make a pejorative out of a great word like that to refer to those who are sexist, I think we just need to educate people as to the truth and educate those who think they know. Mm-hmm. What did you? I want to just we teaching y'all. I just want to go back to what we read a couple of episodes ago. The proverb: a person who knows not and believes that they know is dangerous. A person who knows and knows not that they know is asleep. So those who are talking about our antiquity in an incomplete way fall in one of those two categories. And perhaps we, in good faith, err on the side of them sleeping, mm-hmm. And try to enlighten them. And that's why Tony's not playing, y'all. He's been doing this for years, for decades. So this isn't just something he just, sometimes when stuff gets new to people, they think they got it all down because they just got it. It's fresh, and people get passionate about something when they hear about it. Y'all know folk in the church, right? As soon as they find Jesus, we call them holy rollers. They know more about Jesus than anybody. Well. But then that wears off as time goes on because your knowledge is challenged and you learn more and you become more grounded. 14 publications, 64 trips to Egypt. That's why our brother's here. And he's very important. All of his work and his very existence is important because, and I see it, we don't have enough of us transmitting this knowledge. That includes me. Tony kind of lets me know, hey, brother, you need to get yourself together and transmit more of this knowledge on more of a regular so that it is left behind. And we need to create more scholars. We need more African Egyptologists, if not chematologists, whatever we're going to call them, to continue this research, this history, mm-hmm. so that it lives beyond some of the elders we've named who taught us.
If I can add to that, Metzamela, I've been doing this specific work for 42 years. I'm 70 years old. And so I'm looking at the need to cultivate several generations who will come behind us, because I'm not going to live forever, and they don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to leave a legacy of knowledge that they can build upon. And we also need to expand the flow of our knowledge throughout the Nile Valley. Egypt is central because that's where the greatest concentration of much of this knowledge is. But most people don't realize that there are more pyramids, more mirrors in Kush than there are in Egypt. Most people don't realize that the Nile River, which is the longest river in the world, flows from the south to the north. So its origins are in Ethiopia and Uganda. The Blue Nile supplies 90% of the water that flows through Khartoum, Sudan, and Egypt. So 90% of that knowledge, 90% of that life force comes out of Ethiopia. We need to go to the Nile, to Ethiopia. Haile Gerima, filmmaker Haile Gerima, who has a number of films. One of his most famous films is Sankofa. He has a bookstore on Georgia Avenue called Sankofa Video and Books. Haile told me well over 10 years ago, 15 years ago maybe, he said, you and ASA need to go to Ethiopia, because what you will find that the things that you've been talking about Egypt originated in Ethiopia. And I didn't realize at the time how much truth there was to that until I began to study more of Southern Ethiopian history among the Omero. And what I have found is the story of Asar and Aset, which I referenced briefly last week. That story has its origins in Ethiopia. The foundational story of Kemet, ancient Egypt, has its origins in Ethiopia. So I want to spend more time in Ethiopia, meeting with scholars, digging up that information so that we can expand our knowledge base and understand how it flowed. Like Dr. Clark said, the Nile River is the world's oldest cultural highway. And the knowledge and spiritual traditions migrated from the south down north. And so that geography is important because water flows from a higher elevation to a lower elevation. The Nile River flows from south to north, which is why the southern region of Egypt is referred to as Upper Egypt, and the northern part of Egypt along the coast of the Mediterranean is called Lower Egypt. People followed the river. They brought their knowledge, they brought their cargo of knowledge with them over a course of thousands of years. And what Egypt represents, or what Kemet represents, is the crystallization of the foundational knowledge which had its origins up south. So these are concepts and ideas that really haven't made their way into the mainstream, but those who know. And it's about finding ways to have these discussions so that we can expand our understanding of history without people, becoming offended and understanding what we're talking about and not just reacting to something that they think disparages them or dislocates them from their historical legacy.
Anthony Browder, folks. IKG-info.com, ASA Restoration Project.com. Talk to you tomorrow, brother.
Hotep.
No, sorry. Talk to you Monday.
Monday, the day after tomorrow. Cool.
Y'all have a great weekend. More total Tony Browder for the totality of African American History Month on MIB.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.